Welcome all, this is Gamer 1745 here with another episode of Hearts of Iron 4 with BlackICE Mark II as they're calling it. We're of course playing as Britain in this series. I want to make a quick comment about the audio, particularly on the last episode. I was using OBS to record that episode, which is what I also use to stream it, and for some reason, and I don't know, maybe just settings, and I've adjusted them since, were such that my standard microphone sounded even worse than normal. The microphone isn't good. I will tell you all, I am working on improving my setup, which includes working on improving my microphone, but also new computers, new everything else here. So that's all to come sometime in the future. But let's get going. Let's this right now. So back to standard view. The hotkey to start the recording is the same one to switch over to faction view, so that's why whenever I start an episode you see the faction view starting. Hi Frostivan, and AMSR, sorry, I don't know the anachronism on how to tie a noose. You're talking a traditional hangman's thing. I don't know that I can do that. Okay, we've got another factory here available. So what aren't we producing that we should be? Coastal artillery, mountain artillery, desert warfare, that can wait. Mechanized. I want to do armored cars. Okay, armored cars. Now do the Rolls-Royce armored car. Now we had to research the Rolls-Royce armored car as Britain. Now, and the minor thing I object to that is that they had that in development. No, I can't. I think you're on the wrong channel. Submarine workshops. Okay, so let's see. We're going to wait until the first of the year. Okay, King Edward abdicates. Prime Minister Baldwin has made it quite clear that the dignity of the Emperor will not be impinged, or will be impinged, sorry, if he were to marry not just a commoner but also a divorcee, if that isn't bad enough an American. After much soul searching, and His Majesty has chosen love over duty and has chosen to abdicate, his younger brother Albert will assume the mantle as King George VI. London bookmakers are already taking odds on whether this shy man will make his own coronation. Well, as I've said before, Edward, they did not deny or pressure him not to have the throne because of Wallis Simpson was a divorcee. She did have a bit of a scandalous past for that period, and not just being a divorcee, but other things. The real reason for that was him, as well as Wallis Simpson's sort of who their friends were, as including foreigners, including people that were either Nazis or pro-fascists, and he just was keeping dangerous company. You know, if you look, there was recently good advice there, Nagaro. So you look at it that way, it's not just a divorce person, but particularly who she was. So we are going to have George the Sixth. And tank workshops, which we're also going to let go. Use the buffer. Now I was watching a little bit of the Saturday live stream that Paradox was doing. Daniel was doing, who is a very good player and probably a better player than I am, meaning that he would probably defeat me. But man, just the play style that they were doing, it just winning the game and not playing a World War II game. Okay, develop. Yeah, let's do traumatized. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay. 1st Armored Division was formed in November 1937 on the initiative of General Archibald Montgomery Massingford, the chief of the Imperial General Staff. Now this is different than Bernard Law Montgomery, who is the famous Montgomery of Alamein. At the time, it was initially named the Mobile Division. Jolly good job. Take that. That gave us the going over bonus of the cruiser tank. That was good. Nice. Keep that in mind. And Public Order Act of 1936. The Act banned wearing of political uniforms in any public place or public meeting. It also required police consent for political marches to go ahead. The Act also prohibited organizing, training, and equipping and associations of persons for the purpose of enabling them to be employed in usurping the functions of the police or the armed forces of the Crown, for the use or display of physical force in promoting any political object. The Act had the indirect result of actually improving the stance of the BFU. Their forced abandonment of paramilitary and armed tactics improved the party's relations with the police, and in making it more respectable, increased the BFU's appeal among traditionally conservative middle-class citizens, who became the party's main base in the years after the Public Order Act in 1936 was passed. Yes, you have to understand there are cultural differences between nations, and I'm fascinated by, I don't really want to live in the society, but I'm fascinated by particularly Nazi Germany, but Germany's general like of uniforms for every station of people in life. So so that is a major difference to Britain, who has long had a dislike of the military in Britain, though a like of the Navy. But so the military and the Navy, then, because with Britain, the military was seen when wars happen. That's it. They still, for officers and gentlemen generally in society, they were. I'm talking historically, not what it is today, but historically, they were respected officers and gentlemen within society. The average soldier was not, but that's generally because he came from a fairly lowly station in life. This is, again, traditionally not what was happening in World War II, but it does influence cultural perceptions of uniformity and uniforms as a perception of the military. So now, when wars happened, the British public loved the military, but they really wanted to keep the military as something primarily raised during wartime and goes away, and keeps the Navy, which is generally not seen because they're all in ships out at sea, protecting Britain in peacetime. So I can see the cultural differences there. So we're going to pass the act, I guess. National unity cost us some political power. As we all know now, national unity will be going away. Okay. Well, okay, here's, I agree with you about the playing of the U.S. One of the things, just for everyone who's watching this later, Nagara just asked me, what's the challenge of playing the U.S. or Great Britain? Well, I totally agree, and I have, long before I ever found Hearts of Iron, I worked through battles and scenarios in my head in my bored moments in life, whether sitting in class in school or just having to wait for somebody. I sort of would jump into what ifs in World War II and how things could have turned out different, been done differently. And so that's one thing that's always sort of fascinated me about Germany, is because if you looked at, Romania in any realistic war game, no matter how good you are, no matter what, your combination of all the great military leaders in the world all rolled in one person, you can't take over the world or win the war with Romania. It just ain't gonna happen. And the only reason it can happen, and again, I was watching the this last weekend's Paradox live stream special. The only way it happened is because this game's AI and other elements suck. It just could not possibly happen. But Germany could have won the war. That is, in my opinion, very much a possibility. And so what if Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 42 instead of 41, or they just invaded 3 months earlier in 41, or what? There's a lot of what ifs there. Okay, so that's sort of the challenge with Germany. Now, the U.S. is the only real challenge in my mind with the U.S., playing the U.S. And again, Hearts of Iron is a bit easier than it is in other, maybe more functional war games, is the U.S. really can't lose. So they can only, shall we say it, do it better, do it more efficiently than what was done historically. Now, for me, the challenge with Britain is staying alive, okay? Now, we can talk about the bad AI with Hearts of Iron, but that's holding the line. But, can we win the Battle of France? Can we, hold out in Egypt? Yes, they did that historically, but there are challenges. So there are challenges, and I don't know how many of you watched the previous Hearts of Iron 3 series when I played as Britain. We held out in Bangkok here, and we were able to hold off on this peninsula, and so that was a challenge. Trust me, the Siam front, if you will, was a very hard fought, very challenging, ongoing sort of static warfare, like World War I style, against Japan. And so it was an interesting challenge. And so that's sort of what I'm looking for. I'm looking how well can we hold the line here in France. I was asked on the previous episodes chat below, would I ever possibly play as France? Well, I almost started playing as France, and I didn't even really look, but I presumed the national focus trees would be better for Britain. The tech trees would be better for Britain, and those kind of things. More events for more immersion for Britain. But I almost thought of, well, could we do the challenge of holding the line and winning? But I'm still looking at doing that with Britain. So that's sort of the challenge that I see, is why I think this can be very interesting. So, and we of course have the challenge here of overcoming lack of mobilization here to be able to handle things. Okay, so we're going to improve our industry, and we are going to production caps, factory repair speed, which I just, let's start with this one. This one does have a few negatives for factory construction speed, but that's, I think, worth it. Okay, and we just recently increased production, or started production of armored cars. Transport vehicles. The reason we were a big hit on some of these just now is that we just got that armored division, which pulled out some equipment needs here. Looking to mostly try to, well, we don't have any cruiser production. But it looks like, of course, or infantry tanks. So let's start cruiser production. Just making sure that somehow I didn't miss that. Yeah. Okay. And we have, well, we have some Navy experience as well, but nothing really here to improve that I want to spend. I wouldn't, if those are modeled correctly, I would never make those. Those guys, for World War I, they were what they were, but I would consider making some of these others. Salmo is a French tank. Of course, the FT-17 was French, but the Americans and several other people, including the Italians and the Russians, made a copy of that. And that's a big god-awful Vickers miss. But let's start with that. Keep that going. And part of what I want to do here is get the production line up and producing. And also part of it is, quite honestly, we play Germany over and over and over so often. I have to break it up with something else. I will be restarting soon. Well, infantry tanks now, I guess. They say by the end of the month, before the end of the month, they will be releasing a new Kaiserreich again, and I plan to, let's move that down, and fully fuel that. I want to restart up a new Kaiserreich. Yeah. Hearts of Germany. So like Kaiserreich will be coming back shortly with their new version, and it will be a German playthrough. So it is, depends, and it floats. Sometimes Britain goes up, sometimes Germany goes up, but those are the two fighting for number 2 viewership on the channel. So well, looking at possible sources, we'll get fuel from the United States, from viewers. So I do keep that in mind with what countries I play. Sweden, I think, normally makes it in the top 5, and Canada's normally in the top 5. So with the US, those are our top 5 viewing countries for this channel. I'm happy to grow in any channel. Fortress defense, recovery rates improved. Well, let's look over here. I think this is more important. Yeah, let's get this going. And we also have some free slots here, so we're going to produce a tank factory. Up with that. And we can also produce another truck factory. Okay. Yeah, we can improve our government. Well, we have Richard Raw. Don't know who he is. James Wood. Again, I don't know who he is, but that is... I mean, the pictures are just using some generic stuff there. Royalist reformer. Well, I don't know that we're going to try to recreate monarchism. There really isn't a... Well, the closest I would say in Britain to a monarchist party functionally at this time is the Tories, and there is Jacobite feeling still to this day in mostly Scotland, but in parts of Britain too. But they don't get enough to get even a 1 or 2%. And they're split on the Tory thing. So we'll go with this guy. He should lower our civil factory needs. Yeah. Well, actually, right now it looks like National Spain is doing pretty well. They've got Madrid. Barcelona is the capital. Vehicle level 1 is reached. Great. We should, yeah, let's... do that, but also we need to not just build more efficiently, I need to build more generally. Vehicles. The nationalists are the dark ones. That's National Spain. The light ones are the Republican, light colored. Light aircraft factory level 2. Now we have a trained army command. That replaces that, so getting better. We're not in the war, but we're down here with 2 garrisons. Commonwealth ties, good. Now, I just wanted to look to see if other things have opened up. Trauma and fighter commandos are all B, so limited liability planning. That would be nice. Secure that. But we're going to see about Canada. Hopefully get them developing. Just spotted here. They have a mechanism with BlackICE to spawn some of these rear areas of partisan troops. Sort of keep Spain going. got our other carrier done. Still got that one in production, so well, I don't like the Nelson class BBs. Maybe we should research something better. So in the meantime, well, let's build some CAs. Yeah, only factory level 2 is reached, good. Which is a tiger, is good factories. So, now we have another. Well, again, let's be... Okay, we've got those at least into production, so since we're probably not going to war anytime soon, it's only 37, beginning of, mechanized would be good, I think, next. I think that's over here. Well, it's got to be different than... I think we are making gun carriers here somewhere, aren't we? Maybe we aren't. Well, that's not what we are making. Well, let's cancel that. No, we weren't. That is what we need to manufacture. Yeah, okay. So what we still need to do is make tankettes at some point. Okay. Anti-tank defenses, but let's come over to here. Well, we're already building one carrier. So yes, more carriers, but we're doing one. And so what I want to do here is, once I get some of this industry researched, I want to, because we're now in 37, probably a King George, because I don't like, if you don't know if you know the Nelson class, sort of had the guns sort of forward instead of balanced and a few other things. Just don't like it. So I want to, now that we're in 37, research that real soon, and then we'll build those for battleships. And keep balanced, because I think battleships are still very important in World War II. Now, here though, no, battleships do have a long lead time of production, so what we need to do is start researching that to put them in production. Okay, improved machine tools. But let's... Okay. Usage time is improved, production efficiency. Okay, then... Excuse me. Yeah, well, we'll see how much. We'll see from the German AI with Navy, but quite honestly, I'm not that worried about the German AI. I'm more worried about the Japanese naval AI for the heavy stuff. And I want to be able to sink the Italian fleet. Yes, we can't do that until 15% world touch. We're only at 3, so we're stuck there. I'm just looking to see here if there are things that we can do to sort of liking that. This one is what I wanted to do, but we're not that late anymore. I want Lancashire built up stronger. If we carry it. No. Yeah, we'll put Alexander in charge there. We just got that. I think these are all waiting to 38, yeah. But now they're going 37. Let's do that one. We're going to intervene. The Italian Navy wasn't nearly as good as the British Navy. I don't have any good. Well, the Italian Navy had no aircraft carriers. The Italian Navy's battleships were being upgraded, including some major rebuilds. The Italians could barely afford to do the rebuilds, let alone build new production. Basically, the British Navy can come in and crush the Italian Navy whenever it wants to. The only reason the Italian Navy can sort of, at times threaten the British Navy is the British Navy was pushed so thin because they were protecting their convoys, both within keeping naval units up here and Scapa Flow to try to keep the German Navy bottled up. It was no longer a huge World War I Navy, but it was still keep the heavy commerce raiders like the Bismarck and whatever bottled up, escorting operations, and Prince of Wales, was it, or something that was out here that got sunk. They were also protecting before the Japanese got in the war. They were protecting commerce way out here. So dispersing the British Navy everywhere allows the Italian Navy and Air Force, and the Air Force is important there, to sort of dominate this area enough that made getting supplies to Malta very difficult and very expensive and lost ships, and made the British surface fleet basically have to run and hide during the day when evacuating from Malta and such. And oh boy, I forget which battleship right now, but the Italian Folgore, the commando squads with riding the underwater mini subs, came in and sunk a British battleship in Alexandria Harbor. Now the Italians didn't know they did it because there was only like 4 or 5 feet of water under the battleship at the time, and so it just settled to the bottom. And the British just continued to pretend that it could operate. They kept it a very dark secret that it couldn't move, and so they just didn't let, because it only settled a few feet down, and so to everyone just sort of looking at it, it looked fine. And they continued to bluff, which kept the Italian fleet from operating this area because it was the only British battleship in the Eastern Mediterranean at the time, or the only really modern one at least. And so they just kept it there as a bluff, and it couldn't have sailed. So, the Italian fleet is that. Now, combine it with the French fleet, man, the Italian fleet can't even leave port. Now the French fleet, of course, mostly goes Vichy, and then is mostly sunk either by the British or later by the French themselves. So that's sort of the story of Italy versus, in a quick nutshell. Somebody's battling out here. Okay, concentrated industry, level 2. Marco Polo Bridge incident. Okay, well now we can improve. Well, that is maybe something for us way down in the bottom. Yes, this is what I was doing here. Okay, anti-aircraft systems, anti-submarine systems, torpedoes. I want to protect our ships from aircraft. Deploying development in Canada. That is very nice. The Hindenburg disaster. And machine tools. Okay. So we get these, develop the Raj, and we get an extra research slot. So that is one of the things I'm sort of looking forward to. I wanted to do so earlier rather than later. We can do this. Okay. Yep, the Republicans are pushing back nicely, but nationalists killed off all the partisan spawns back here, which means they'll probably start pushing again against the main front line. Now, the previous British series I was just playing, the Total War series, had an option for Britain to intervene, which obviously it didn't and probably wouldn't have historically. It was just, I did it because, hey, having a Republican Spain on my side would have been nice. But I sort of agree that it historically probably would not have happened. Well, plus but we still have a little more production capability, so So it looks like these are all spawns from a nationalist partisan spawn. Okay, now we built that last carrier. How long until we get, okay, long time for the charge. Do research. So the ground plus looks like it has longer range. Some visibility, 33, let's figure out, this one's more expensive, so do we just presume to build it? It has a lot more torpedo attack. Hit points 64. This has a lot more hit points. Well, let's build some cheap cells. Okay, now we have a lot more fuel because we're no longer building one of the big yeah, I think that's about right. There is a good chance that Republicans could have won the Spanish Civil War, with particularly a bit more intervention by other nations. And so a 1 in 3 chance. Well, Britain is limited in what it can build at start, because it's not, there was no consensus. There was a disarmament movement still strong even as late as 37. It was not until 1938 and the Munich crisis here that Britain really started to rearm. And so if the games follow history well, you have the lack of preparation for the war, and so it's surviving and being capable of fighting in the early war. That is sort of the big disadvantage with Britain. Britain also, unlike Germany and Italy at the start, has a far-flung empire, and especially, what's Britain? Obviously we're playing Britain here, but we don't control Australia. And Britain didn't control Australia, but it had, because it was part of the Dominion, it had certain independence. They couldn't just start drafting Australian soldiers. Britain couldn't. Britain could ask Australia to do it, and so if Australia thought it was a good idea, they followed along, and they did. So when you put the whole British Empire together, where they did have much more direct control over somebody like the British Raj, you put the whole empire together, it's this huge, far-flung thing that you've got to protect. And so that is something that the Axis didn't have. Now, had Germany won and occupied everything west of the Urals, you're going to have a massive manpower drain. And so you get all of that done, and if Britain was still alive at that time, unoccupied Britain, and America's come in to help. And so even if they've won there and they've won in North Africa, where is Germany going to find the units to invade Britain? It would actually really be hard. So if Germany overextends itself, that then becomes part of the problem, and that's sort of the balancing question. Yeah, well, see, the Dominions, yes. Manpower is critical in a total war. And I put that, use that term, because if you look at 18th century warfare, a soldier was a valuable thing and not easily replaced, and manpower wasn't nearly as critical until you really start getting with the French Revolution and the levy en masse, moving the whole society into warfare. So in the sort of the total war that you start seeing, particularly in World War I and World War II, manpower is critical, particularly for any long war. You got to divide every war into two types of war. You have a war of what I would call maneuver and decision on the one hand, and the other hand, a war of attrition. Okay, clearly, Britain and France, the British and French empires, if you will, at this time, which includes, Vietnam and wherever else. These two greater empires, these things, they could clearly outproduce both manpower and equipment and bullets and aircraft than Germany. Clearly. There is no question an attrition war in 1939, who is going to win? It is going to be Britain and France. They are clearly going to win. But Germany is able to, it starts out as sort of an attrition war in that nobody's doing anything really along here. They're able to turn it into a war of maneuver and decision in which the German army is able to come in, cut off first, the sort of professional mobile elements of both the British and the French armies. That's something that was critical that most people don't realize. The sort of de Gaulle and his sort of armored division attacks and whatever, these were very new units that weren't, they were like created in 1940. I think the first French armored division was. So they don't have the long tradition. So a lot of the French army that moved up into Belgium to try to hold the line that gets cut off is sort of the professional full-time soldiers, where like the Maginot Line defenders are a mix of sort of full-time garrison guys and the levy en masse into France and trying to hold it, and the other units that are back in this part of France that are somewhat mobile that are trying to react to it. These are either new units or levy en masse reservists, so they can't compete with and move around. So first, Britain and France lose their a lot of their core professional units. Now Britain saves a lot and even saves a bunch of French core professional units through Dunkirk, as we all know about. But that's not really enough time to even the units that get back to France. It's not enough time to reorganize, re-equip, to re-get into the war before they're threatening Paris. There was no way that France could have held Paris at that point, and so they, I think, made a good decision and declared an open city and evacuated. So Germany wins that war of decision and maneuver. So when it's that, Germany can win. Germany tried a war of decision and maneuver against the Soviet Union. So did Napoleon. The Soviet Union is too big for the scale of attacking armies, because everything is relative. For the scale of attacking armies, is too big to win it in a war of decision and maneuver, so long as you keep enough units, and the sort of famous new advanced units, the T-34 units that were over here, that got shipped back for the winter offensive out of Moscow, those units weren't destroyed. So had all of Stalin's good motorized, mechanized, armored units been sitting here and get destroyed early in the war, then there would not have been any good, effective units to survive out that. But so it becomes a war of attrition. So when you're looking at that manpower on the war of attrition, both to fill the ranks of soldiers and to work in factories and grow the food, manpower is critical along with production. You have to, in a modern war, you can see what happens in Russia in World War I. World War I was a modern war, in which Russia did not have, had only like a rifle for every four men in the army or something, the Russian Imperial Army or some element like that. And so, really good advanced regiments. They were, fully equipped, Tsarist units, great, but weren't necessarily modern or trained for modern warfare, but they were well equipped. They get slaughtered. Russia is trying to constantly buy weapons, and I could go into a lot of detail on that, but to maintain itself, it can maintain the manpower quotient, but it can't maintain the production quotient. So without machines in a modern warfare, with the machines to make the rifles and the machine guns and the aircraft, or the aircraft and the rifles and machine guns themselves, without enough machines, you can't function in a modern war as well. So it's man and machine. Okay. For those of you who are watching later, I'm discussing what's going on with Nagaro live. I hope it's of interest to people, and you can give feedback to some of the well, we really don't need that yet. Let's see what we can do. Vickers Armstrong, Leyland, don't know Northold. Rolls-Royce, that's, you know, company Vulcan Foundry. Don't know much about them. Vauxhall, yeah, they're sort of a car manufacturer, I know them as. Heavy infantry tanks, infantry tank, cruiser tanks. You know, Vickers Armstrong to me is their sort of main, well, it is the main armaments company in Britain. They also were a major shipbuilder too, and we should be a shipbuilder as well. But yeah, it's fast, infantry tanks, reliable, that's medium. Okay, we're going to go with that. Okay. Yes. Exposition Internationale, Paris, 1937. The Paris Universal Exhibition. France is proud to launch with great fanfare the Universal Exposition in 1937. I'm not going to read all of this, but you may have seen this also covered with Third Reich events that looks at it from the German side of affairs. But it was a major thing going on. Okay, Stanley Baldwin resigns. 2 weeks after the coronation of George the 6th, Mr. Baldwin has announced that he will resign the premiership in order to retire at the age of 70, having led the national government on and off since 1923. He has been a steady hand responsible for bringing the British Empire out of the Great Depression, and in recent years has reluctantly overseen the beginning of the imperial rearmament and the abdication of Edward VIII. He steps down as a popular and successful prime minister, but has he done enough to counter the growing threat from Germany? Okay, so now we have to do this. Let's actually see the picture update. No, he didn't do enough, and neither did Chamberlain. Well, thanks, Nagaro. To me, I see this whole conflict of World War II as a series of causes and effects that start well before. So as I'm thinking about this, to go well before World War I. No, it goes back to the Concert of Europe, which is 1815 in Vienna, led by Metternich, and that is, of course, coming out of the Napoleonic era, which goes back into pre-revolutionary France and Europe. And so this is all a flow of history with causes and effects and why things are happening, and extends to this day. And this is how I see and view history. And so it's all an interweaving, and sometimes my monologues, which are becoming a little bit more of dialogues with input from the stream, can seem a little disjointed because they're not necessarily well prepared in advance, and they sort of jump around a bit. Mr. Hitler don't want to go to war. Okay. Yeah. Hitler wanted a small war. Just a war with either Czechoslovakia or Poland. Just a small war. He didn't want a big war. And we now have more civil factories. Okay. So we are producing that. We still want to increase our amounts of civil factories, but we also need to now from a game playing standpoint, the way BlackICE works is military factories, which I'm used to from standard Hearts of Iron, produce military equipment, obviously, and naval factories produce naval equipment. Now, these per factory, each of these things requires a certain amount of resources per factory producing these things. So now, as you improve production efficiency, you can produce more in a shorter time. So in effect, you produce more Matilda tanks for fewer resources over time, especially as this efficiency goes up. Even though these numbers don't change, instead of producing one every 10 days, you're producing one every 5 days. So you're, in essence, per thing produced, you're actually using half the resources. So that is important, okay? This I'm just giving explanations to people who don't know how this all sort of works in somewhat detail for BlackICE. So, but this is sort of the normal standard thing. Well, BlackICE has introduced these other building types, which the more you have in your country, the higher these levels down here become. And so it reduces even more so the build cost for, and as you can see as I'm hovering over it, for these different things. So if you're only wanting to, say, produce more of a particular type of tank, and somebody can do the math in a little more detail than I can, but if you want to produce more of it without costing any more of these resources, which is particularly for somebody like Germany in oil and aluminum and whatever, in Japan, as they start to correct some of that aluminum, but is to produce it without costing any more resources. It is better to build more of these factories. Now, if you have unlimited resources, no one does, but functionally maybe say like the US to some degree or other things you can look at that has near unlimited resources, you might think, and it might be, it depends on how you're doing the math and what comes out, is build more military factories, which will require more resources. But these, as you can see, construction costs between this and this is much cheaper. So but the math doesn't, I don't know how many and at what levels and how well it all tweaks out to being where the equilibrium lies. So when I'm playing as Germany, I'm particularly like trying to get some more of these built because they build faster, get them in, and they can produce more tanks and more trucks or whatever without costing me any more resources. But what I'm running into here is, with BlackICE, of course, we have lots and lots of equipment type: coastal artillery, mountain artillery, desert warfare equipment. I'm just looking at things that tankettes. See, like I have no tankettes in production. We have, and I have no naval fighters. So I need more actual factories in production so I can produce more different kinds of things. So you have to sort of keep that in mind as you're building here. So that's why I'm both expanding the civilian factories to be able to buy, import, whatever you want to call it, more resources, use them as trade, but also use them to build more factories. So we have that. Let's see, I want to build tankettes. Don't know why I want to build tankettes, but it tells me I need to build more tankettes to fill slots. So we are going to build more tankettes. Yes, they can do that kind of stuff. Japanese build up on the Chinese border. Okay, looks like we're getting ready for the Yep. The war kicks off. Okay. I'm going to end the episode, not the live stream, Nagaro, so just hang around here for a second. Okay, again, as I just said, I'm going to be ending the episode here. I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank you all for liking the videos. I really do appreciate that. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. If you want to see the next episode up early, it's on Twitch. Go to the videos on my channel and see it there. And if you would, you can do that. And of course, I really love hearing from you, so please post questions, comments, suggestions, ideas, whether it's feedback on the sound or gameplay feedback or other things. Really love hearing from you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.